Oh my gosh,
Ready?
it's the last class ever of AP Lang. This is so weird. So this is not usually how I imagine our last class, you know? Usually when we're back at school, it's like we do like a definition day and everyone gets up and like reads their definition of something, and it's a really cute bonding experience. So kind of missing that today. But hey, this is even cooler because it's like, whoa, it's crazy, it's new, it's different, mixing stuff up. So for your last official assignment of the school year prior to your culminating activity, which I will post for you later today, you are going to be looking at sample essays on the last time right you did on Tuesday, the JFK speech. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen with you just so we can pull up the assignment from Google Classroom and the rubric here. You can see I have way too many tabs open in my life, always. Okay, so I shared with you the one-page version of the new rubrics. If you guys can see here, make sure that you're scrolling down to the second page where it says rhetorical analysis rubric. Don't look at the synthesis rubric, very different, but they look the same. The words are just different. So I wanted you to be able to look at the new rubrics, even though these sample essays that you're reading, because this is an older prompt and the new rubrics are new. So they were scored on the old rubric, which is like way more vague. See how old, oh my gosh, like that's all you got was one little paragraph describing. Okay, so we're gonna look at sample 2A together, and I just wanted to talk about it on the rubric a little bit because it is kind of like non-traditional in the way that it's not like necessarily how I teach you specifically to write the essay, but it still scored really well on the rubric, and it would still score really well in the new rubric. So I just want to be able to talk through together like why it's such an effective rhetorical analysis. I don't like advise generally to sort of like try this approach, but for more advanced writers and more advanced thinkers, like this definitely works. So that's why I wanted to be able to look over it together. And then when you're done looking at the samples, I want you to look back at your own and see like, what do you think you would score yourself on your own? And then I'll be scoring those for you on Monday. And I put those scores, like the rubric scores, in Turnitin.com. So if you want to know what I would score it as, that's where you can kind of be checking that. So coolio, JFK, let's do this thing, huh? Okay, so we're going to read the sample essay together, and then we're going to flip to the rubric and just sort of talk about why. What do you guys think of the handwriting? It's all right,
I
right?
can't see.
It's a lot better than mine.
Yeah. See, but look, I like that you can see it's okay to scratch out. Although, are more of you guys typing? Are you guys going to type your essays? Right?
Yeah.
Kind of assume you'll type. All right. So he says, throughout his speech in which he condemned companies for raising steel prices, Kennedy repeatedly appeals to a sense of communal sacrifice and collective responsibility in order to rally his everyman audience around the ostensible cause for outrage. From the beginning, Kennedy, a millionaire Harvard graduate, includes himself in the, I don't really know what that word is, a camp of everyday Americans by using the first person we. The list of sacrifices being made by the 185 million Americans are then shared by him as well. He is on their side, united with them. Yet in the very same breath in which he lumps himself in with the rest of the country, he takes another privileged group, the handful of steel executives, and sets them apart, separate. Such us versus them distinction is a critical justification for the contempt and righteous indignation that Kennedy heaps on the steel companies. But his appeal does not rest solely on class warfare, because if he played up the class bit for too long, he would lose the faith of his hardworking and self-sacrificing audience. So he switches to real, tangible patriotism. After all, there's a war on. And so the pitch is not limited to union workers, but also extends to reservists and servicemen and every American businessman and farmer. These professions connote a fighting spirit, rugged individual ingenuity and self-reliance, 100% Americanism. Kennedy is far from being in bed with the unions. He is careful to note, albeit without elaborating, that the steel companies enjoy an unusually good labor contract, implying that steel companies have every right and reason to succeed. But his litany of economic statistics lead further credibility to his condemnation of the steel companies, precluding the possibility of the companies replying it was necessary for business. Further evidence of Kennedy's rhetorical caution can be found in his disclaimer that price and wage decisions are and ought to be freely and privately made. Because in 1962, it would have been unprecedented for a president to coerce a private company into taking a specific economic action. But again, Kennedy invokes the uncontroversially virtuous idea of higher responsibility so as not to undermine his message. And his final closing lines cleverly put the ball in his opponent's court. Kennedy does not directly go on the war path or appear to be aggressive, yet manages to appear strong and principled without giving the steel companies any ammunition to respond to the actual substance of his speech. Okay, that was a big long breath. I wanted to read it all together instead of, normally I feel like I pause after each paragraph, but again, because this wasn't really structured like the traditional essays that we see, it kind of all flows together and you have to look at the piece as a whole, which is why it scored on the old rubric, it scored a 9, which is the highest possible score to receive. But I want to talk about it in terms of the new rubric because it still really would earn that 6 on the new rubric. And the reason being is it's this really thoughtful, in-depth analysis of what Kennedy is doing. And I feel like you can see that this writer kind of really understands the rhetorical situation, really understands the context, and really focuses a lot on the audience and connecting Kennedy to that specific audience of the everyday American. And then you can kind of see other examples. Like I feel like even if we just go to this, let's pull up the rubric now, sophistication. Okay. So even if we look at this sophistication point, which I feel like is the hardest one to earn, obviously, and I know that's like some frustration sometimes, how do I earn this point? They really get into this significance of the writer's rhetorical choices given the rhetorical situation because they talk a lot about audience of the everyday man. And then they also even talk about like the context of in 1962, it would have been unprecedented for the speaker to do this certain thing. They have this really thoughtful understanding of who Kennedy is as a speaker, that he is this elite person as president, but he's still connecting himself with like the non-elite audience. And then they also do this one, the passage's complexities or tensions. I just want to be able to show you an example of that because I actually think that's kind of the maybe easier way to try to earn your sophistication point. This writer does it twice. So when talking about this idea of the list of sacrifices being made by the 185 million Americans are then shared by him as well, he is on their side, united with them, yet in the same breath, he lumps himself in with the rest of the country. He also is taking this other privileged group, the steel executives. So they're seeing this complexity of like, he's trying to unite with the audience and at the same time villainize the steel companies all in one place. So that's just kind of an example of a complexity of the text because they're looking at two things that he's doing simultaneously at the same time. And then they do that again later on here. really anytime you see yet. That's kind of your key. Use the word yet in your analysis and you're looking at a complexity. Okay, and his final closing lines, cleverly put the ball in his opponent's court. He does not directly go on the warpath or be aggressive, yet he manages to appear strong. So he's strong, but not aggressive or directly on the warpath. And that's, again, like a complexity of the text. So really thinking about that, and that's what makes this so sophisticated. Lastly, I feel like it earns the third one as well. The style of the writing was really consistently vivid and persuasive because I feel like this student has incredible like command of vocabulary. I don't know if you guys felt that too, but really the word choice that they use, a fighting spirit, rugged individual ingenuity, and self-reliance. Like I just feel like they're
they sounded so smart.
Yeah,
I was I was kind of frustrated. I was like, bruh, I got it too.
No, and remember that that's only 1 point on the rubric. The sounding smart is
No,
really
I mean,
only that sophistication.
But their points, like Ms. Miller, they knew what they were doing.
So so that's why I wanted to start with the sophistication point, but like let's get into the root of it because I feel like first of all, remember, if you guys want to determine if you potentially earned that point, you only have to do one of those things. So when you're doing your essay for the real test, I would like strategically plan like which is the one I'm going to try to do, which do I have the best shot at doing. So for me, like if I was taking this test, I wish I could. That'd be so fun.
You should.
I would try to go for number 2 because I feel like I can like pinpoint those things as I'm reading the text and try to look for subtleties and complexities. So I'd probably try to go for number 2. Now I feel like I'm gonna call Nate out here. I feel like Nate is probably like pretty good at going maybe for number 1 or number 3. You know, I feel like Alex and Fabian, you guys actually do have this like vivid, consistent style. Like you have this like eloquence in your writing that's really beautiful. And I think that's what you need. And then Ryan and I don't know if Alexa's still here. I feel like you guys are very much so number 1, you know, like exploring that rhetorical situation and really thinking about connecting audience to speaker. So I feel like you just have to like kind of, and that doesn't mean any of you that I just kind of shared that about, like you could pick any one of them to try to go for, but I would just say rather than trying to focus your energy on doing all 3, just focus on like picking one to really intentionally do. And then the other 2, if you happen to do them, that's awesome, but you know what I mean? You only have to do 1. So any questions about sophistication?
No, ma'am.
Okie dokie. Okay.
No.
So the next thing.
Actually, sorry, I do.
What? What's up?
Which one did you say that like is more my strong suit?
I think you do this one very naturally. Number 3. I think you have a very persuasive and eloquent style of writing. I think both you and Alex do. But I don't know, you might want to pick 1 or 2. Like if you're doing this one kind of naturally, you might want to choose 1 or 2 to try to like.
Oh, okay.
If that makes sense, you know. So yeah. I feel like I wish if there's one thing I can work on for next year as a teacher, remember this is totally new rubric for me, so this is my first year doing it. But I feel like I would try to emphasize practicing this more in class, like complexities, tensions in a text. I feel like that's what I want to work on next year is really getting students to do that. Number 2 a lot. Because I feel like we did number 1 a lot. Like we're always talking about rhetorical situation. But I feel like this is maybe where we could focus a little more time. Okay, let's do thesis point next. Again, I know I'm jumping all over the rubric, but I'm just trying to do the easier ones first since they're only 1 point versus the big 4 points. So I think what's interesting about this essay is like the thesis doesn't look like what you guys have been producing exactly, and that's okay. You don't have to have like I know I always tell you, list your 3 rhetorical choices in your thesis. And you're going to get the point if you do that. But you also don't have to do that to get the point. I usually tell you to do it because I think it's the easiest way to earn the thesis point. But actually, if we look at this rubric is a little more in-depth, this kind of scoring guide here. That's synthesis. If we go down to, okay, so rhetorical analysis here, when it talks about the thesis point, you're only not going to get the point if you're not addressing rhetorical choices in your analysis throughout the essay. Like if you were only summarizing the passage, talking about what the other was saying, but you weren't analyzing rhetorical choices, you're not going to earn that point. Your thesis can be multiple sentences, and it can be anywhere in the response. So I think that's what this sample does really well, is they're kind of like, their thesis is sort of like embedded throughout the response. And they're definitely analyzing rhetorical choices. So that's why they would certainly earn that point. I feel like the first,
I have a question about that.
yeah, but one quick second, because I feel like this first sentence is a really good example of like the thesis throughout his speech, in which he condemned companies for raising steel prices. He repeatedly appeals to a sense of communal sacrifice and collective responsibility in order to rally his everyman audience around the ostensible cause for outrage. So the reason I'm saying it doesn't look like what you guys normally produce is you normally have like 3 to 5 like very specific rhetorical strategies, whereas this one is just focusing on appealing to that sense of sacrifice and collective responsibility, and that it's done throughout. So I feel like this is the best example of the thesis in the essay, and it's really strong because it identifies a rhetorical choice, the appealing to the sense of communal sacrifice and collective responsibility. It talks about the purpose of the overall speech, which is to condemn those companies and create that outrage. And it clearly has an awareness of audience with this like everyman audience. So, yeah. Fabian, question?
My question was, well, you basically already said it. It was just me gonna ask you like what you did think their thesis was, but you already got to that. So.
Yeah, I think it really is here in the beginning. It just looks a little different because it's almost like space and thesis are kind of embedded together in one sentence. And it's just not organized the same way that we always organize. Now,
It won't like harm us if we play it like safe, right?
No, not at all. The only way it might harm you
Is
in that sophistication point.
yeah.
But if you use that sort of traditional structure, which we've looked at a lot of high scoring samples that would earn all 6 points with that traditional structure, it's the quality of your ideas needs to be sophisticated. Like really understanding the text, really conveying your understanding of that rhetorical situation or the complexities that are in it. My best advice would be try to analyze something using the word yet. So maybe we'll do a little bit of practice of that next week. But, just to go back to like Florence Kelly, she was sorrowful yet strong at the same time, right? She was like sorrowful for the children, but like strong in her tone to like change those laws. What were some of the other ones? I don't know how I would necessarily do it for the science one. That one might have been a little trickier to talk about, like the subtlety. But the Margaret Thatcher one, well, she was, she was very like solemn and kind of grieving for Reagan, yet at the same time, she was really like uplifting and talking about what this like great man was. So it was kind of like this balance of like grieving for him, but also celebrating him at the same time. So those are just examples of those like complexities. So you can still have that traditional chronological structure analysis of the text, but like deepen your analysis to be sophisticated. Okay, in terms of evidence and commentary, the biggest thing is, and I think for you guys, if I want to speak to like if you did a more traditional structure, the biggest thing is that you have to provide evidence for all claims in your line of reasoning. So if you had 3 rhetorical choices or 4 rhetorical choices, you have to have evidence for all of them to be able to earn the 3, even just the 3. So you have to have all of that evidence. Now, I feel like normally people do that part just fine. I feel like the harder part is with the commentary, is really explaining how the evidence supports the line of reasoning, which is your analysis of the evidence, and explaining how it contributes to the writer's argument, purpose, and message. So the 3 means you did that like sometimes in your essay, but maybe you didn't do it super well throughout. And the 4 means every single rhetorical choice you were analyzing, you did a really nice job of analyzing it in depth and connecting it to overall purpose and message. That sort of thing. So I feel like this sample essay clearly does a nice job of that, because we're seeing the evidence here. And then as we've kind of talked about already with that sophistication in terms of analysis, like you really see them talk about like what Kennedy is trying to do. He wants to create that unity between himself and the audience, and then separate and sort of villainize the steel companies, to create contempt and righteous indignation for them. And then you see this kind of like nice transition. Here's where they're kind of going into a new one. His appeal does not rest solely on class warfare, because if he played up the class bit for too long, he would lose the fact of his hardworking and self-sacrificing audience. So he switches to real, tangible patriotism. So then you can see them moving on to like a new rhetorical choice. And then they're providing evidence for that one, right? Here's the patriotism. And then here's the really thoughtful analysis. These professions connote that fighting spirit, that rugged individual. So we move from like villainizing the steel companies to like building up the audience themselves and the professions that they have. Yeah.
Ms. Miller, I'm gonna go to C course.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions about your writing, or we can always talk about them later too if you want.
Yeah, I just wanted to set up a conference thing.
Perfect. Email me.
Okay.
Shout out in the vid. Bye, Fabian.
Thank
Good luck
you.
with your video
Bye.
today and your
Bye, thanks.
copy.
Everyone that's watching this, watch my YouTube videos. Bye.
I mean, that's pretty much all I wanted to chat with you all about today. Was just, again, I wanted to do this particular one. I still want you guys to read Sample 2B. I won't like take up any more of your time doing that together. But Sample 2B is still a really good score and would earn a 4. I do want to remind you too, like you don't have to earn a 6 to do a good job on this. Like that's a really hard thing to do. I don't know that I would get a 6 if I had 45 minutes to read and analyze the text and write a good essay. You know, it's really hard to do. So if you're getting the thesis point and 3 of those evidence and commentary points, that's like a really good 4 out of 6 is a really good score. So keep that in mind as you read Sample 2B to kind of look at why Sample 2B is good, but obviously not as high level as Sample 2A. And yeah, that's pretty much it. When you're done looking at the samples and then looking at your own writing, there's a couple of things. Number one, like especially that we have a full week next week plus 2 days of the following week before your test. Set up a writing conference if you want to talk about it together. We can even do some practice of like revision and rewriting so that you feel more comfortable writing in that kind of tone on your AP test. And then don't forget, you do need to reflect. That's the most important part of these sample essays. Is the whole purpose of them is trying to help you grow yourself as a writer by looking at effective models of writing. So what made 2A so effective? What made 2B so effective? Where do you feel like you fall? Are you like 2A? Are you like 2B? Are you between the two? Or are you below 2B? If you're wherever you kind of feel like you are, and then again, I can chat with you about where you are too. And just fill that out. And that's all you're turning in to me today is that Google form. Okay. Do you guys have any questions for me? I see I have a chat.
For the test, I know you talked about this like I think a few weeks ago, but are we still able to print out the text or?
Yes, if you have a printer at home, you can print the text to annotate. I've been advocating for the like take notes on your own sheet of paper only because like I know a lot of people don't have printers. I don't even have a working printer, so it's like, you know, it's just that's why I've been kind of advocating for that. But if I had a printer, I would definitely print out the text. That would be my first move, was to be able to.
Okay.
And you can underline like the quotes directly that you want to use instead of having to like kind of jot them down and stuff like that. So yeah, you'll be able to print the text. You'll be able to handwrite or type, whatever you're more comfortable with. Yeah. Any other questions, Alex?
No, I don't think so. When we print, that's like a part of our time to like do everything, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I would maybe like if you're printing, like have it all set up, ready to go the second the test starts and you click print. I mean, I would start reading already like on the computer as you're waiting for it to print out and stuff. Just maximize your time that way.
Okay.
But yeah, you know what I really want to get some clarification on, and I'll check in with some other teachers. I originally thought you had 40 minutes to write and then 5 minutes to upload. I can't tell if you just get 45 minutes total, and so that 5 minutes is kind of like, I think that 5 minutes is just sort of your buffer period. Like make sure you're submitting. So obviously if you go over and you take 43 minutes, you better make sure. I think it's just a little risky because if something happens and your computer's too slow to upload it and it won't collect your response, then that would be kind of intimidating.
Yeah.
You don't really know what's going to happen there. So that's why I would just, try to do it in the 40 minutes, which is why I really hope that next week we can practice some just like writing fast or typing fast on different topics, just to kind of get in that go mindset.
Yeah, because I feel like I have a hard time like fully understanding the text and then like making sure I have enough time to like convey it all out. So
yeah, I honestly feel like giving enough time to the reading and understanding the passage is worth it. I would spend, if it were me, I would at least spend 10 minutes. I know that then it feels like, oh, I only have 30 minutes to write the essay, but I just feel like really knowing the text itself is your key to writing a good essay.
Yeah.
Like it's all about the text. So even if you I feel like you could even go all the way up to 15 minutes on the passage and then 25 minutes to write the essay. Because if you really know that, and then you can kind of go through and write it. So I don't know. I mean, you kind of had to see what's going to work for you personally, which is why I wanted to do these past couple time writes. We do have a few more, like I can give more options on that if you want to practice with another text. And I definitely have more things I can share with you guys. I just didn't want to like overload you. I feel like I've just been given practice after practice after practice. But yeah, there's always more if you guys want them. So okay, so last big announcement here, last couple big announcements, if you made it to the end of this video. Number one, posting your culminating activity this afternoon, but you don't need to start it today. So for period 1, it's due Wednesday night. For period 1 and 2, it's due Wednesday night. For periods 5 and 6, it's due Friday night. And that's just the final exam schedule piece of it.
And it's the letter about your class, right?
Yes. So it's a letter. You're essentially, and you'll have all these directions later today, but you're writing a letter reflecting on what you learned and kind of motivating next year's students. So I plan to give it to, like each student will get a letter from one of you next year. And I will provide you on Monday with a list of like, hey, here's everything we did over the course of it. Because I know like it's easy to forget some of the things we read about or talked about, the discussions we had. So I'll give you like a bulleted list on Monday. So like I said, even though I'm posting it today, do not feel any sort of pressure to start on that. It's literally all you have to do next week. So yeah, just whatever works for you. And then next week, You will still have essential questions, but they're primarily going to be about the AP test logistics. So I know that you know how to get on and like get set up, and you're not going to have any issues there. And then I will share YouTube videos from other AP Lang teachers if you want to watch those. And I'll hold my classes at 2 p.m. after office hours, and those will really just be like fun review sessions, not like classes, not assignments. We'll do some games, we'll do some AP Lang trivia, we'll do some Kahoots, we'll do some categories, which isn't related to AP Lang, but does help you practice the creative thinking and the quick thinking. So that's why categories is my favorite game. I feel like anyone who's had class with me, probably like that's the only thing they remember about me is like, oh, Miss Miller loves categories. But yeah. Okie dokie, y'all. Well, have a phenomenal day, and I will be back from 1 to 2 for office hours. So I will see you then if you need me. Okay?
Thank you, Miss Miller.
Thank you, Miss Miller.
Have a great weekend, guys.
You.
You too.